Special welcome to our guest speaker this morning, Minister Michael McGrath for Public Expenditure and Reform. Michael, you're most welcome. Lovely to see you here in person. I don't know if you all remember, but actually this time last year we had our breakfast meeting via Zoom, and I was actually standing in front of that picture over there trying to portray Cove as best I could, so it's really, really good to have you here this morning. So also really lovely to see Chief Executive of the Port of Cork, McGrath here this morning. Great to see you. We have Bob Savage, we have President Maggie Cusack of MTU, we have Captain Brian Fitzgerald from Simply Blue, and Adam Cronin from DP Energy. So great to see you all here. So since our previous event, all the team at the Chamber have been working tirelessly on a number of initiatives. As we welcome the cruise ships back to Cove, it has been fantastic, and I'm all sure you'll have seen through social media the vibrancy in Cove and what the cruise ships bring to Cove and the region and locally. The Cove Mobile Working Hub is progressing nicely, while the public realm is very much moving in the right direction under the guidance of Cork County Council. So as part of the Cove Chamber team, it's very welcome, and I'm really delighted to announce our newly elected Vice President is Toddy Stafford. So Toddy, you might just stand up so people can see you if you don't mind. So the Chamber is certainly in safe hands, that's for sure. Toddy does a phenomenal amount of work in the community here in Cove, is very much immersed in Cove Hospital, and we're very lucky to have him on board. So this morning, I suppose we have, without what's going on in Ukraine and Russia is very much in all our minds at the moment. And from a humanitarian point of view, it's absolutely horrendous. So it's really important that we're reading about the troubles and the tragic every single day. And I think it's really important for us to reflect as an island how lucky we are to have an island of peace. And I think a lot of us, this is the first war that we've actually ever seen. And it's so real that we can't comprehend it to what they're going through. And Ireland has been amazing in welcoming the refugees over here, and giving them refuge whilst they're going through this horrendous time. So before we kind of get on with the business of the day, I would just like to first thank Alan Murphy and the team here in the Titanic for putting out an amazing breakfast for us here this morning and really showcasing Cove in a very, very positive way. So thank you, Alan. Really delighted to be here. So this morning we have one Spotlight speaker. Spotlight's a really, really important benefit that we offer our members here in Cove and Harbour Chamber, and it's a really good opportunity for you to promote your business and I suppose, and as a platform for you. So we do really encourage people that if you want to avail of that service, you just contact the Chamber office and we'll organise for you to speak at one of our breakfast meetings. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to Mr. Colin Moorhead, who is the manager of AIB Bank here in Cove. We are very fortunate that AIB continue to have a physical branch in Cove. Colin is very active throughout the Cork Harbour, and some of you may know that he was Admiral in the Royal Cork Yacht Club for 2 years and only just stepped down in January of this year. So we're very fortunate now to have the benefit of Colin's expertise on the Council of Cove and Harbour Chamber. So over to you, Colin.
The joys of bank iPads as they lock down on password when you just don't want them to. Good morning, and Joanna, thank you very much for the introduction. As she said, my name is Colin Moorhead and I'm the branch manager of the local AIB here in Cove. A career banker with AIB, I joined 34 years ago in Dublin, and having spent many years working on international assignments with the bank across Europe and the Middle East, returned to my native Cork in the noughties, from where I have gone on to hold various wealth management and retail positions and took up the current position here in Cove in 2017. AIB can trace its roots with the town of Cove back to at least 1829. A lot has changed since then, but we're extremely proud to be the only bank remaining on the Great Island and proud to have its entire management team living and working in the community in which we serve. Supporting the communities in which we live and operate is a core tenet of AIB's corporate strategy, as we deliver on our purpose to back our customers' dreams and ambitions. Over recent years, and increasingly as we move forward, those dreams and ambitions are being recast and redesigned through the lens of sustainability and, in particular, climate action. Progressing our sustainability agenda is a strategic priority for AIB. We are actively integrating climate change into our business to accelerate our understanding, strengthen our strategy, and to clarify our actions. We're reducing our own carbon footprint and commit to being net zero by 2030. We're supporting our customers and our communities in their transition to a low-carbon economy with an ambition that green and transition lending will account for 70% of all our new lending by 2030. And we're making real progress in that regard. 4.5 billion in green lending since 2019 and 19% reduction in emissions from operations year on year. From an economic and social inclusion perspective, we recognise the responsibility that comes with the scale of our business. We aspire to contribute and advocate for a fairer society that is socially and economically inclusive. And we do this by investing and raising awareness in access, education and innovation for our customers, our colleagues and our communities. So whether it's 300 million for social housing finance, which is fully allocated, or 288,000 second-level students supported with financial literacy programme, or over 10 million spent in 2021 alone supporting community causes, many on our own doorstep, just some of the achievements to date in this area. In AIB Cove, we will continue to play our part to ensure a greener tomorrow by backing those building it today. So whether you or a family member are interested in a mortgage, perhaps to buy your first home, or to move, or to switch from another provider because they're leaving the Irish market, or whether it's just simply to save money with a range of variable, fixed and green mortgages, we would like to talk to you. If you would like to open a bank account with us or switch because your current provider is leaving the market, or just simply to join the nearly 2 million digitally active customers who avail of our award-winning services, come and talk to us. If you're concerned about low deposit rates and inflation affecting your savings, we'd like to talk to you. If you want to finance a new green car or even a second-hand car just to avail of our customer discounts on insurance, again, come and talk to us. If you're a business that wants to make sustainable change that can reduce costs and create savings for your business, come and talk to us. We know it takes bravery to run a business, and COVID has posed many challenges for all of us. We're committed to supporting you and your business and have partnered with the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland to provide a range of solutions for our SME and agri customers. So in summary, if you would like to deal with a bank that is based on the island and is proud to support and serve the residents and business of Cove in helping them to achieve their dreams and ambitions for nearly 200 years, come and talk to us. Thank you very much.
Fantastic sales pitch, Colin. You'll all be banking with AIB. Okay, so before we get down to business, I would like you to, and to appreciate the fantastic environment we have here in Cove, we're going to showcase our town through Ireland through a video. So I really think that video signifies how far Cove has progressed over the last 20 years, and that's really thanks to the government, Cork County Council, and to all the groups like the Cove and Harbour Chamber, Cove Tourism and Cove Tiny Towns who have brought Cove to this level today. So it really is, it's a lovely video. So if I may, Cove and Harbour Chamber are here to represent our members, and we're here to voice their concerns. So I'm going to this morning highlight two key concerns: energy supply and security, and the question of safe access. The critical question is, how safe are we, the residents of Great Island, in an emergency, dependent on a 19th century bridge? Both issues are vital to the safety and prosperity of Cove and our lower harbour, and there are two issues I wish to address this morning. Cork has always been central to the production of Ireland's energy. We have Whitegate Oil Refinery, we have the Hada Power Station, the Kinsale gas fields, and the recent proliferation of offshore wind and solar renewable companies. Indeed, energy is the theme of our May event, of which I'll allude to at the end of the breakfast meeting. Ireland may be the world leader in food security, but that can certainly not be said for our energy security. It is very evident that we are in a severe energy crisis, and it is only getting worse. And we are at the risk of the lights being turned off. To survive, we need to keep the lights on. We need to survive the now to reach the future. We cannot become a green economy overnight when 87% of our total energy supplies are fossil fuels. It is simply unrealistic. We need to transition realistically to get to where we want to be in 2050, which is 100% carbon neutral, and this is very much achievable if we all work together. We are sitting on the jewel, Cork Harbour. In Cork, we have acknowledged the fantastic opportunity that exists in offshore wind, and a great deal of groundwork has actually gone into this in that regard. We have the state-of-the-art port facility in Ringaskiddy by the Port of Cork. Dáil shipping have been earmarked the assembly hub for floating wind. We have it all on our doorstep. So I would ask you to consider your thoughts in relation to the energy transition, which is getting a lot of media and political attention at the moment. In relation to energy, we know that the future lies in renewable sources. However, when you look at 87% of our energy is currently generated by fossil fuels, the Carb gas field off the west coast provides approximately 25% of our current energy. However, Carb is declining and will be depleted by the end of the decade. What happens then? It is widely acknowledged that we will require fossil fuels for decades to come. With that in mind, wouldn't it be prudent to consider opportunities for LNG and or look at exploiting indigenous sources of fossil fuels? There has been a lot of discussion about the lack of LNG terminals here in Ireland, and shouldn't we also consider the opportunity we have to develop the Barry Row field off Cork's south-west coast? So along with the energy space evolving, population in East Cork is also growing, and in particular with what we're concerned about here this morning, Cove. There is now a population of 15,000 people living in Cove, and the conversation continues now for nearly 30 years about the second access road into Cove. And here we are this morning talking about it again. Proper roads infrastructure is obstructing residential development, limiting tourism, coach traffic, commercial activity. Safety and security of movement need to be put front and centre in delivering a second access point into Cove. Huge industrial potential at sites like Marina Point cannot be fulfilled. Safe pathways for cyclists to visit Cove by road are non-existent in the present infrastructure that we have. and the tourism industry is being limited by such antiquated access to Cobh. So if you all remember, I don't know the exact date, but 2 or 3 years ago, a lorry jackknifed on the Photobridge and Cobh was cut off for hours. What would happen if an ambulance needed to get on or off the island? Well, it nearly did a couple of years ago, twice in fact. Thankfully not fatal, but it could have been. We have a 19th century bridge built in 1804, servicing Cobh in the 21st century. So to conclude, Beverley Bridge is a bridge from the past. The people of Cobh need a bridge to the future, for the safety and growth of our island for generations to come. Thank you. Conor Moles, Chief Commercial Officer of the Port of Cork. We as a Chamber, I've mentioned before, the relationship we have with the Port has been going from strength to strength, and they have been a huge support to the Chamber for many, many years now. And they've really, really immersed themselves into the community of Cobh, and it's lovely to see, and you're very much a part of our community, I have to say. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Conor, whom in turn will introduce our guest speaker this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, and I'd like to add my welcome to that of both Joanna and Colin this morning. The Port of Cork has been privileged to sponsor this breakfast series for the last 2 years, right through the challenges we all faced during COVID, and it was really enjoyable to have the opportunity to have the in-person event with Professor Cusack last month, and now the opportunity to see you all here again and introduce Minister McGrath. Minister McGrath is no stranger to Cork Harbour, having grown up in Passage West. Before entering national politics, he served in local government as a member of Passage West Town Council and Cork County Council, and during his time he was a huge advocate of Cork Harbour. He was elected to Dáil at the first attempt in 2007 and has been re-elected every time since. In his time in the Dáil, Minister McGrath has served on several Oireachtas committees, including the Finance Committee, the Oireachtas Banking Inquiry, the European Affairs Committee and the Public Expenditure Committee. As Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, he is responsible for delivering well-managed and well-targeted public spending. He does this through modernised, effective and accountable public services. His department oversees the implementation of the National Development Plan. This drives the programme of public service reform and has a key role in decisions made across government. It is an honour to have Minister McGrath here with us this morning. Hopefully he will share with us his ideas and his aspirations for Cork Harbour and the surrounding area. Minister McGrath, you are very welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Conor, for the very kind and generous introduction. If my voice is a little strained, it's not because of any overindulgence, but rather singing along too much last night in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But I am genuinely delighted to be here in person in Cobh, and it's hard to believe it was a year ago, Joanna, that we had the virtual event, which was really good, and we made the best of the situation that we were facing at the time, but there is no substitute for being here in person and meeting each other and just making the connections and reacquainting with each other again. And of course, the obvious benefit of seeing at first hand the beauty of Cobh, and Cobh is looking remarkably beautiful, I must say, and I want to commend all of you for the work that you have done in that regard. I want to acknowledge my Oireachtas colleagues, Deputy James O'Connor and Deputy David Stanton, and to thank you both and acknowledge both of your consistent and continued advocacy on behalf of the people of Cobh, the Harbour area, and indeed East Cork generally, two very effective deputies that you're very fortunate to have. So I see this as a great opportunity to say a few words before you this morning on a number of issues. And I do want to start by just thanking the Port of Cork for their sponsorship once again of this event. Conor Mose, the Chief Commercial Officer, and Owen McGettigan, the Chief Executive of the Port, who joins us here as well today. And to congratulate the Port on the very successful container terminal development in Enniskillen, which has now come into operation, the largest single investment by the Port of Cork in their proud history. And it is a port that makes such a vital contribution to the economic life of not just Cork, but the entire region. And it was heartening to see recognition of that recently, one aspect of that, through the Ambassadors Award, and I had the privilege of participating in that very nice event at Cork Chamber, where we linked up virtually with the United States for that presentation, celebrating the connection between the Port of Cork and the east coast of the United States. So it is such an important part of life in the harbour area and plays an enormously significant role in that regard. I want to thank you, Joanna, and the Chamber for your continued work and your advocacy on behalf of the people of Cove and indeed beyond over the last number of years in particular. And I want to thank you personally for your dynamic leadership, and I think she deserves a round of applause. She's a I think you're all so fortunate, and I think you do realise it, how fortunate you are to have somebody as capable and enthusiastic and energetic as Joanna providing the leadership of the Chamber. And it's very evident, the results are there for all to see, and the Chamber has played a leading role in the rejuvenation of Cove in so many respects in recent years. It has been community-led. Of course, Cork County Council has played a very significant role, which I want to acknowledge as well, and government has assisted in any way that we can. But this is a town with a history that I think is without parallel in Ireland. Immense beauty, rich and deep natural heritage, of course, as well, and that is driving the tourism that you're experiencing and benefiting from here in recent years as well. And I was recently walking the Hallbolan Island, a recreation park, with my own kids, and I was just pointing out to them the history of Cove, and we were reading the various signs as we walked around about Annie Moore and about the Titanic, the history of emigration and the coffin ships, and then moving on to more modern history. And they were fascinated by it, and you couldn't but be struck by the depth and the richness of the history here. And I think you are doing it justice through the extraordinary work in modernising Cove and ensuring that it is using all of those natural assets and natural amenities to the best of your ability at this time. I'll say a quick word on the economy before coming back to more local issues around infrastructure and so on. And the Irish economy is in good health overall. We've come through the worst of COVID, and the economy has rebounded very strongly. I think the fact that we were in a position as a government to extend very significant supports to the business community and to individuals who were impacted by COVID was the right decision and the correct approach, and I think that has paid dividends. And we are now in a situation where we have more people working in Ireland than even at the pre-pandemic peak. We have over 2.5 million people working in our country. Ireland is among the fastest growing economies in the European Union. It has allowed us to significantly improve the public finances. If you consider we had a deficit in 2020 of some 18 billion euro in 1 year. Last year that fell to 8 billion. This year the forecast is a very small deficit of perhaps less than 2 billion, and next year it is for a forecast of a surplus. So in a very short period of time we have transformed the public finances and brought them back into good health, which is so important for all of us in terms of our sustainability as a country, and managing that responsibly is critically important. We are very fortunate, of course, to have such a strong presence of foreign direct investment. The IDA had a record year last year, almost 30,000 new jobs created. It is a fantastic state agency. We now have 275,000 people employed by FDI companies in Ireland, and Q1 of this year was remarkably positive in that regard. We are seeing an announcement almost every day at this point. But it's not just all about FDI. Enterprise Ireland is supporting Irish businesses that are in the exporting sectors. And Enterprise Ireland clients now employ over 200,000 people in our country, and they created 12,000 net new jobs last year, which is such a strong sign of the extraordinary work that they are doing. But of course, we're now in a new space, and we're in a new space because of the terrible events in Ukraine. And our first priority as a government, and we always say this, is to be as generous as we possibly can in the humanitarian response and in supporting the people who come here. And some 26,000 Ukrainians have come to Ireland in a truly desperate situation in the last couple of months, and we are doing everything we possibly can to extend support to them. Over 16,000 are availing of accommodation being provided by the state, and mainly in hotels and guest houses. But as time goes on, if the numbers keep coming, we are going to see more group-based accommodation settings, as is up and running in Mill Street at the moment. We're providing full access to our social welfare system immediately. People are being given a PPS number. Children who come here are starting in an Irish school within a number of days, and communities are wrapping their arms around the Ukrainians who come here and are welcoming them with open arms in the way, of course, that only Irish people can do. We don't know what will happen in the weeks and months ahead. We hope and pray for an end to the war as quickly as possible, and we just simply will have to hope for the best in that regard and continue to show global leadership through our role on the UN Security Council and indeed in the European Union to advocate for peace, to advocate for the strongest possible set of sanctions in respect of the Russian regime. In addition, of course, the war in Ukraine is having an economic impact, manifesting itself in particular in the very high levels of inflation that we're experiencing. And coming out of COVID, we were seeing a high level of inflation anyway because of monetary policy by central banks globally, the amount of money that was pumped into the system, the strength of the rebound of the international economy. I think surprised most commentators. Supply chain disruptions across the world all created a scenario where we were experiencing high inflation, but now of course that has been greatly exacerbated by the war, with the impact on certain commodities in particular, and of course on energy and the concerns around energy security, which Joanna has touched on there. But notwithstanding all of that, the resilience of the Irish economy is such that we are still forecasting, and all of the international bodies are forecasting, strong growth for the Irish economy continuing this year by whatever measure you use. Modified domestic demand, gross national income, employment will continue to grow, unemployment continuing to fall, investment we expect will continue to increase. So there is uncertainty and there are economic risks. There is no denying that. They are there for everyone to see, but we believe that the underlying strength and the underlying health of the Irish economy will be sufficient to bring us through that in good shape. Of course, all of this is manifesting as well in very serious cost of living pressures that the Irish people and indeed businesses are experiencing at this time. We have done our best as a government to respond to date. We've brought in a package of measures through various interventions worth about €1 billion after the budget. There was around €1 billion in the budget in relation to tax reductions, social welfare improvements and so on, and since then we've brought in a raft of measures from the electricity credit, reductions in VAT, reductions in excise, targeted measures to improve the cost of living pressures, such as reductions in the drugs payment scheme threshold, for example, supporting the haulage sector through a very targeted intervention. But we would be the first to admit that it will never be enough at a time when inflation is running at such a high rate, and it's around 7% in Ireland. Many of our European neighbours are experiencing even higher rates, 10, 12% and even up to 15% in some of the countries in Eastern Europe. So there is real pressure there. We expect it will continue. It will begin to moderate as the year goes by, and we do expect that it will peak in the next number of months and then begin to subside. But the truth is that nobody knows for sure, and it is of course inextricably linked with the overall situation in respect of the war and the global dynamics. Mention was made earlier on of the National Development Plan, which I do have responsibility for. It is a highly ambitious plan, the largest public capital investment programme that any Irish government has ever introduced. 165 billion out to 2030. This year alone, it provides a budget for €12 billion in terms of public capital investment. And of course there are pressures. Contractors are experiencing the construction inflationary pressures that are manifesting throughout the economy, and there are issues there that we will need to respond further to, and we intend to do that because we want to get the maximum amount of projects completed in the time frame that we have available to us. Cork and the harbour area will be a very significant beneficiary of the National Development Plan. So last week you will have seen the National Transport Authority unveiling its €600 million Bus Connects plan for Cork. This will see 54 kilometres of new cycling and walking infrastructure, as well as 75 kilometres of new dedicated bus lanes across the main corridors of the city. Under the plan, it's intended that bus journey times will be cut in half across most of the 12 proposed corridors, and a public consultation will now take place in June, and a series of community forums will be held to provide an opportunity for people to give feedback on that plan. Under the European Union's COVID Recovery and Resilience Plan, Ireland is receiving funding of just under €1 billion, and as part of that, a key project that will be benefiting from that funding is the Cork Commuter Rail project. It is a project of €185 million in value, the vast majority of which is coming from EU funding. We'll see the creation of a Cork suburban rail network between Mallow and Middleton here in Cove being very significantly strengthened, the capacity being added to increased frequency to every 10 minutes. The project is making good progress, meeting the targets laid down by the European Commission, and it will be fully completed by 2026. And there are various milestones that will be advanced this year, going to tendering and so on, to ensure that that continues to remain on target. As you know, the work at Dunkettle is at a very advanced stage. It's a project worth over €200 million, which will be transformative, I think, in terms of traffic flow in and around such an important and critical junction in our road infrastructure in Cork. It's about 30% complete at this time, and the current estimate is that it will be completed in Q1 of 2024. So we have 2 more years of it that we have to put up with, but it'll be well worth it. A completely free-flowing junction, whatever direction you approach it from and whatever direction you're going to, you won't meet a traffic light. So we're really looking forward to seeing that being completed. And of course, in addition, we now have the advanced works underway in relation to the M28 Cork to Ringaskiddy motorway scheme. Those works will take about a further 2-year period. It's expected that the main works tender prior information notice for the main construction contract will be published later this year, and that the overall project will be ready to move to full construction stage in 2024. And it's my job to ensure that that continues to move through the various processes that are there in terms of the public spending code and the approvals and all of the business cases and so on. And I'm watching that and all of the other projects that are of local significance very, very closely, I can assure you. In the city centre, we have really exciting plans. I think there is a renewed sense of confidence that the event centre will actually happen after many false dawns, and we look forward to seeing that get underway in the months ahead on the former Beamish and Crawford site. And of course, we've provided over €400 million as a government for the regeneration of parts of the city centre, including the Docklands area and the Grand Parade Quarter and the redevelopment of Bishop Lucy Park. And you will see the physical manifestation of many of those projects over the period ahead. Turning to more local projects, and Joanna has of course highlighted the issue of access to the Great Island here, and it has been an ongoing issue for the people of Cove for so many years. And as you will be aware, Cork County Council submitted an initial project appraisal to the Department of Transport back in 2019. The Department then engaged with Cork County Council regarding the public spending code, project appraisal requirements, and the need for the preparation of a strategic assessment report to evaluate the range of potential options for addressing connectivity in the area. And I do welcome the fact that the Council has now appointed consultants to carry out that strategic assessment report. It's expected to be complete and submitted to the Department of Transport by late summer. Will then have to be considered. It will ultimately end up on my desk, I've no doubt. But it does seem to me that the answer that we will receive from that is pretty self-evident. There will be a need for a new bridge. I think there is no question about that. From my perspective, when you look at the island of Cove, it is an obvious risk, and it is one that we cannot continue to stand over. We will need to see a new bridge, a new investment in the road infrastructure leading to Cove, and I look forward to working with you in relation to that over the period ahead to make sure that we advance it through the process and that we secure funding when there is a defined project that we can actually deliver. Just to touch briefly on tourism, of course Cove has such a rich maritime history and represents such a major source of tourism for the Cork region generally. The government recognises the importance of tourism for the Cork Harbour area. We're investing nationally almost €300 million this year on tourism, including about half of that for Fáilte Ireland, to enable them to market places like Cove in the key markets throughout the globe, and I think we will see the benefits of that as the years go by. But of course you're leading from the front here in Cove, and you're doing so much positive work yourself to put out front what you have to offer. And when I look at the Cove Heritage Centre, the Titanic experience, of course we have the Photo Wildlife Park, and I see Sean McCune here this morning, the tourism trips that are now available to Spike Island. There is so much to offer here from Cove that I think you're doing tremendous work in that regard, and the government and the local authority will work with you to ensure that we continue to maximise the immense potential that is here from a tourism point of view. And I know you all very much welcome the return recently of the cruise liners to Cove, which will bring a very high number of tourists, not just to Cove, but to the entire Cork region, and that will be a very significant economic injection to the entire area. I very much welcome the progress that is being made in respect of the Public Realm Enhancement Scheme, which I know has now fully come through the planning process, and I look forward to working with you and your local representatives to make sure that we can now proceed with the implementation of that Public Realm Enhancement Scheme. I had a look at the website and the video, and it's really exciting to see what is in the pipeline here for Cove, again to further enhance the visual appearance of the town itself, and look forward to seeing that rolled out. I will of course finally touch on the issue of climate change and energy security that you spoke about there, Joanna, as well. And we have really ambitious targets as a country that we must meet to reduce carbon emissions by 51% by 2030 and to be net zero by 2050, and that will require transformative change. And this is not going to be easy in agriculture, in transport policy, in energy policy, in the way that businesses operate. But the government is going to work with all of the stakeholders to do that in a collaborative way. And while it is a great challenge, there is no doubt it also presents an outstanding opportunity, particularly in the area of renewable energy. And off the Cork coast, and indeed elsewhere around the coast of Ireland, we have a unique opportunity to harness the potential of wind power. And to enable this, the government has updated our planning code. We have now passed the Maritime Area Planning Act 2021, and the Maritime Area Regulatory Authority is expected to be fully established early next year. At the end of March, just gone, I approved the levy framework for the development of the expansion of existing relevant projects on the East Coast. Following this approval, Minister Eamon Ryan is now inviting applications from the first batch of offshore wind projects for maritime area consents, and this is an important step towards reaching our 2030 targets. He also intends to launch the first of at least 3 offshore auctions that are currently planned this decade for offshore wind, and that will be done this year. The war in Ukraine has certainly once again highlighted the importance of energy independence, and the government is determined to utilise to the fullest extent we can the potential of wind power both off the east coast and indeed off the coast here in Cork. And we do want to see the inclusion of floating offshore wind in an auction at an early date as soon as we possibly can, and we just need to work through all of the steps to make sure that that is done. So in government I really see my role as being an enabler, somebody who has responsibility for public services, for public spending, for the National Development Plan. I'm there to try and help get things done, and I would just encourage you to continue to liaise with myself and colleagues so that we can ensure that projects keep moving forward, because there is always a process that has to be gone through. It can seem very slow and tedious, but the important thing is to make sure day by day, week by week, that they are moving forward and that we are making progress. I think that we have shown extraordinary resilience over the last couple of years, and increasingly now we're seeing more and more metrics and reports come out about how countries handle COVID, and undoubtedly when the full story is told and measured, Ireland will have been seen to handle COVID really well. Of course, every death that happened was a death too many, but when you look at the statistics that are coming out in relation to excess deaths and resilience measures, Ireland is comparing really well, and I think that is a credit to all of you. I know we asked so much of people over the last 2 years, and it's great to see Alan and the team here at the Titanic being able to trade strongly again, because we did ask a lot of people. We did our best to support you all, but we know it was incredibly difficult, and we thank you for your support and for your fortitude over that time. So I just want to congratulate you all on the work that you're doing. I think that Cove in particular has an incredibly bright future, and I am committed to working with you on an ongoing basis to address all of the issues that are here and to avail of the opportunities. And I look forward to welcoming a delegation from the Chamber to my own department next month, where we can go into all of these issues in more detail and get you to meet some of the key officials as well who have responsibility for delivering on many of these areas. So thank you all once again, and have a great weekend.
Minister, I suppose recently I was disappointed, as I know the business community here and broader field in Cork were, that the government had decided not to progress a bid for the 37th America's Cup. The gains associated with an event of that size obviously had the potential to significantly outweigh the expenditure that would have been required to host it, and provide a significant boost to the harbour communities that have been so badly hit, as you appreciate, I know in full, by the recent COVID pandemic. But I suppose the most disappointing part of the fallout, in my view, from the decision is the loss to the harbour, and particularly Cove, of the potential water access infrastructure, such as pontoons and public waterside access, that would have remained post the event if it had gone ahead. I suppose despite the massive potential which the town could derive from marine-related tourism, with its location and, as we know, the largest natural harbour in the Northern Hemisphere, we have the incredible situation that the Great Island of Cove has 3 kilometres of coastline, straight coastline, a lot of it with significant deep water access, and yet we have no public landing access to Cove from the water. Passage has public marine access, Hadda has public marine access, Ringaskiddy has public marine access, but the historic town of Cove, with the size of population which live here, doesn't have any access. Can I ask, are you aware of any plans to remedy this deficiency and in our infrastructure, and if not, what support as an enabler, as you said, could you maybe guide us with? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. First of all, in relation to the America's Cup, I acknowledge that there is considerable disappointment that the government is not proceeding with a bid. That decision was made following very careful consideration. The Department of Sport has very considerable expertise in relation to winning bids for major events and examining the capacity of the country to cater for and accommodate those events. You'll be aware of the success they've had in winning the Ryder Cup, for example, the European Championships, and I think it's fair to say that the potential offer of hosting the America's Cup is not one that was expected when it was made last year. The department last October wanted a period of 6 months to do a deep dive to assess all of the implications and opportunities of hosting the America's Cup. They consulted widely with the local authorities, with other key stakeholders. They examined the challenges involved in delivering the necessary infrastructure in a short period of time, essentially within the next 2 years. There was the possibility, though it wasn't certain, that the organisers might be willing to push it out a further year to 2025. But when they looked at the planning issues, the environmental issues, the regulatory issues, their view was that there was too much risk attached, that we could not stand over with certainty or ability to deliver the project within the period in question. They felt it was too short, and their view, and they made a recommendation to government ultimately, and we could have overruled that recommendation, but it was following a very comprehensive analysis that they conducted. They did do a cost benefit analysis and assess the economic impact. It was on the positive side, but marginally relative to other major events that we have won, where the multiplier of the benefits to the costs would have been far, far greater. So I acknowledge the disappointment. It's not to say that we won't be able to do it in the future, but the time horizon involved was just not sufficient, unfortunately, on this occasion to accommodate the event. I'm not aware of any specific project currently in the pipeline in relation to public marina access. I'm well familiar with some of the facilities you've mentioned there, including in Passage West. So I will engage with the Port, with Cork County Council and the department, and of course yourselves locally. We were discussing it briefly, Joanne, earlier on, and you mentioned the need for a feasibility study. I think you have a site in mind, so I'll work with you on that, and if we can assist in providing funding for that initial first step, because access to the water is just so important, and I'll work with you to see if we can explore the potential of doing that.
Good morning, Minister. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive presentation, and also for the supportive statements that you made in relation to offshore wind, and particularly recognising and acknowledging the fantastic opportunity of the resource outside Cork Harbour and the opportunity for floating offshore wind in particular. I'm not sure, in fact I don't agree at all about the position that was reflected by the Chamber in terms of taking more fossil fuels out of the ground, for example in the Barrier Row field, when we have a choice, and the choice is to go for clean, green, marine renewables as opposed to fossil fuels. And that future is very much within our reach here as a country, and also within Cork Harbour. What I would say, one of the huge constraints in terms of accelerating towards that future for all of us, where we have a triple bottom line win for environment, for economy and for energy security, a big constraint locally is in relation to grid. And Minister, I wonder if we could ask that you would really sort of lean in relation to EirGrid, and looking at the opportunity to remodel the work they've been doing under the auspices of shaping our electricity future, such that they really pay attention to optimising the grid capacity within Cork Harbour and the area as it is now, and thinking much more strategically about the investment that's required to bring those offshore resources into the grid system sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thanks very much, Val, and I absolutely agree in relation to the issue of grid infrastructure, because companies like your own and the partners that you are working with to develop the potential of floating offshore are dependent on that grid infrastructure being enhanced, and we recognise that that is a major issue that has to be addressed as a government. We are working very closely with EirGrid and with the regulator in relation to that, and there is hardly a cabinet meeting at this stage where the issue of energy security, grid infrastructure and the potential of renewables, in particular floating offshore, is not discussed. And I sit on all the cabinet committees, but I've been directly involved in the discussions on that issue. You'll be aware of the energy security review as well that Minister Ryan is bringing forward, and I just want to assure you that grid capacity and grid infrastructure is fundamental to our objectives in that regard, so we'll continue to work with you on that.
Hello everyone, I'm the newest member, David Canary, and just want to say hello to everyone. I also had the privilege of looking from the outside into Ireland for a number of years on infrastructure, and it is important to mention and acknowledge, Minister McGrath, that Ireland's infrastructure programme is considered world class, and how we deliver projects in this country, no matter the criticism within the country, is considered globally a world leader. And one of the two principal organisations involved in that are Transport Infrastructure Ireland and the NTMA. And the question I'd have for the Minister, and I might actually include Cork County Council in that, is there any way that these three key organisations can be empowered and maybe increase their resource and their mandate to deliver on the projects that we need now, such as the grid and offshore wind.
So TII and the NTMA, David, is it? Yeah, okay. And the council, yeah. Thank you very much for that, David, and for acknowledging the public capital investment programme that we have. We now have, I think, a very strong architecture in place around the delivery of that. So, as you know, the NDP sits alongside the National Planning Framework as part of Project Ireland 2040. The aim being that our public capital investment programme and our spatial planning are coordinated and all pointing into one direction towards how we want Ireland to develop over the next 20 years. And that will involve most of the growth being focused outside of Dublin, with Cork being the fastest growing city and region under Project Ireland 2040. So that means ensuring that our spatial strategy and our public capital investment programme are coexisting in a careful way, but in a way that brings mutual benefits. So TII is a key partner in the delivery of our infrastructure on the transport side. The NTMA, of course, sit over the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund. The investments that they make are of a commercial nature. Sometimes debt issuance, other times they take equity, but they have to be satisfied that any investment that they make is commercially sound, and they now have a very strong mandate from government in relation to investments in sustainability and the green and climate agenda, and they are very much working on that. And Cork County Council, as one local authority, would be a partner in that regard. So you are seeing more and more examples of joint ventures involving the state and private partners, and I think that brings so much benefits, because the state can bring a lot to the table, but private investment and private expertise is absolutely essential in the delivery of the infrastructure that we need, including around renewables and grid capacity as well.
We meet with our members all the time, and one thing that's coming up quite regularly is the planning. It's about the green energy, so they can't even get to a stage where they can assess if it's suitable areas out in the outer harbour for their green energy that they want to get up and running. And they spoke about an agreement that was in the UK that seems to be working really, really well. It's the key stakeholder agreement, where the government bodies are directly partnering with the key energy groups to get everything from planning and infrastructure over the line. And is that something that you guys would consider, the government would consider?
Thanks very much, Louisa. We are open to any new structures that would help us to accelerate the delivery of offshore, but I think the key change is the setting up of the new statutory body, and there is a huge amount of work going on now to get that in place and up and running, and assuming then the full statutory responsibilities in Q1 of next year. So that's really where the focus of the government is, and the passage of the legislation has involved a complete rewriting of the licensing and the planning regime in respect of offshore activity. Without that, it simply would not have been possible to navigate through the existing system, because it was built up over centuries, to be honest, and was not fit for purpose in relation to the potential that's there on the offshore side. You simply could not have worked your way through the existing regime, given the scale of ambition we have, 5 gigawatts by 2030 and up to 30 beyond that, because we see this as affording enormous export potential for Ireland. If we get the grid infrastructure right, the interconnectors in place, Ireland could become a major exporter of energy, and we're uniquely positioned to do that, given our location and the natural assets that we have. So that requires us to make sure now we meet all of these milestones. In addition, in the wider sense, because I know planning is a key concern more generally around public capital projects and indeed private projects as well, there's an exercise underway now being led by the Attorney General to essentially rewrite the planning code. It is a massive piece of work. We will have a new consolidated planning bill later this year, which will, we believe, greatly reduce the legal risk of successfully completing projects. So we expect to have a new consolidated planning bill later this year. So the AG is leading that exercise with the whole team of planning experts nationally, and it's coming along quite well. But we're seeing too many planning decisions getting overruled in the courts. We have, people are entitled to bring judicial reviews. We recognise that it's part of the system that we have, but it shouldn't be the case that on planning grounds decisions made by the local authority or by a broad planol are getting overturned in the courts. But there are gaps there currently that need to be closed, and we believe that the new bill will greatly reduce the legal risks involved in that. So that's one of the reasons why that process is now underway and will be complete in the coming months.
Regarding the renewables, in the UK they brought the VAT down to 0%. Can that happen here in Ireland?
So when it comes to VAT, and we've been looking at this in great detail in the context of energy in recent weeks, we have constraints under the EU VAT directive. So we have a derogation in respect of certain activities. You're allowed two lower rates, essentially. We have 13.5% and we have 9%. But you cannot zero rate an activity that was not zero rated at the time of the original EU VAT directive. So there are limitations there in relation to VAT law. It is something that you have Irish law, but that has to be consistent and compliant with the EU VAT directive. There is a new directive coming into being. It will allow certain additional flexibilities, and we actually availed of that in the change that we brought in there in the last couple of weeks by reducing the VAT rate to 9% on domestic gas and electricity. But I don't believe you will have an opportunity to zero rate anything that previously was charged at a higher rate under the VAT directive. That won't be possible.
And then if I'm going to speak to you as an auctioneer, that is my own profession, that from a housing perspective, there, as you saw, as I said to you, there are 15,000 people now living in Cove, with many more who want to move to Cove, but then we now have a shortage of property. There's houses, 1,509 houses planned for Cove.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, every time a planning permission goes up, there is an objection due to the infrastructure, hence I brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
So this is going to be our problem going forward, is that we don't have any building going on in Cove at the moment. And it's such a sore point, because there's so many people who want to move here, and in general obviously moving to East Cork. So I suppose just to highlight the infrastructure, and the N25 also as the corridor for East Cork is really important. So the other thing too that I just wanted to mention too, and I suppose it's a key thing for government to know, is that we are in a very much a rental crisis at the moment, where there is nothing for rent in this, especially in Cove at the moment anyway. From a private landlord perspective, they've exited the market. There is no, I suppose there's no benefit for them to be here. So do you feel that anything can happen in government to try and encourage them back into the market?
Thanks, Joanna. Well, on the infrastructure piece, I think we should acknowledge the main drainage scheme as well, and the completion of that, which is transformative for the harbour. You know, having a clean harbour and the ending of pumping of our sewage into the harbour, that is just such a game changer, I think, in relation to the recreational and amenity potential of the harbour. So it's great to see that up and running. So that's one major infrastructure issue now dealt with, and I know there was a lot of disruption. We had it on the other side of the harbour as well, but it's great to see that at such an advanced stage. So I think really it is about road infrastructure, it's about access, and it is about safety. And I acknowledge that the level of risk that's there with the current infrastructure is not one that we can accept into the future. And I think that's the key objective really that will involve, in my view, and I've spoken with senior officials in Cork County Council who are directly involved on the issue of the R624, and they recognise and they fully expect the outcome of this SAR report will be a recommendation of a new bridge. It could well be the case that the project will have to be phased. There may well be a number of elements to it that will have to be implemented over a period of time. Building a new bridge always involves significant environmental issues that have to be worked through, and in the system we have, people have a right to object, but all submissions have to be taken on their own merits and in good faith, and considered by the planning authorities in accordance with local and national policy and rules. On the issue of housing, we are seeing a significant increase in supply. We've seen the stats from AIB and other banks, and indeed BPFI, about the level of mortgage activity, but there is a shortage of rental accommodation. We had about 20,000 units built in each of 2020 and 21. That was with construction shut down for 3 to 4 months each year, and it will be 26,000 this year. But the run rate in terms of commencements now on an annual basis is about 34,000. So the number is going up. That will improve the situation. The look, I can't speak about individual taxation measures outside of a budgetary context, but we are looking at the issues that you've raised to see what can be done, because we are concerned at the drift out of the market of smaller landlords in particular who might have 1, 2 or 3 properties. It is an issue, we acknowledge that, and it's one that we do want to make progress on.
Minister, that was a really insightful overview of what's happening in Cork, Cove and the Harbour, and indeed Ireland. And I really hope you all enjoyed this morning. I think the venue is amazing. We had a really lovely breakfast, and again I'd just like to say thank you to Alan Murphy and all the team here in the Titanic. In particular, I'd like to thank the team in the office. They're amazing. Louise and Kim, you might just give them a round of applause. And Rachel, they're all here. So this is our second in-person breakfast meeting, and our third one is going to be on May the 20th, and it's actually going to be in the famous Commodore Hotel, and we'll be running it all about energy supply. So it's going to be very much an information session, and it's highlighting, I suppose the energy supply, energy security, the struggles we're facing, and it's going to prove a really good event. It's not going to be an hour; it's probably going to be 2 hours. So we're going to give it the time that it deserves. It's really, really important. So keep an eye on our social media. And again, I'd like to thank the Port of Cork for their ongoing support, and Great Island Media and Dan Noonan for all the tech this morning. So I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. But anyway, and thanks to our spotlight. So thank you. Good morning.